Fuck it, let's begin. 1973. We shall set the scene carefully. It is in, let's put ourselves in Staffordshire, a grim county, whose only real claim to fame is once producing pottery and toilets. It's a very exciting place, Staffordshire. Have you ever been there? Anyone been to Staffordshire?
Yeah. Yes.
Sad to hear that. I grew up there. I'll not return. 1973, Staffordshire. A lot of exciting things had happened in Staffordshire. Rain had fallen, sun had come out, snow had come. The birds had returned from winter. They had spent the winter in the south of France, having a lovely time. A whole squadron of geese flew overhead, mingling with ducks and tiny blue tits in the sky as they swirled down from the heavens towards the county of Staffordshire. In the middle of the county of Staffordshire, there is a place called...
the very next monument.
Called the very next monument. We should explain. In the 15th century, when monuments were first being built in the United Kingdom, there previously had been any large buildings or statues. But in the 15th century, they began to erect a series of impressive edifices aimed to corral both nature, the gods, and incarcerate the nature and spirit of man inside a building. So there were a whole series of monuments. One was just a big spoon, that was very nice. The second was
The Princes of the Italian Renaissance.
the Princes of the Italian Renaissance, beautifully standing in the middle of Stoke-on-Trent. No one knew why they were there, but they were there, and people were going, gosh, that looks very impressive. They didn't know that the souls of Renaissance artists were actually trapped inside those 90-foot bronzes that loomed over the rest of the town. The future career of key members of Take That would be influenced by having seen Renaissance artists looming above head for their entire lives. Alas, this is before that story, although it sounds jolly good. 1973, the monuments. The important monument that we're interested in is the next monument, which is an entire town in Staffordshire. Because in the 15th century, as they continued their building of construction and exciting things, as they looked forward to the thrill of the Industrial Revolution, the thrill of the First and Second World War, the joy of an endless Tory government, they realised they needed to make a place that could be filled with hope. The next monument was to be that place. It was a place of wonder, a place that cried out, "You on Podgy at you."
It won't be long now.
It won't be long now. We'll finish it one day, honestly. You see, it was the last one of the great unfinished towns of the United Kingdom. Staffordshire has more unfinished towns than any other county in our gorgeous isle. Derbyshire's a close rival. They have 93 unfinished towns. Staffordshire has 96, which is very impressive, including, very importantly, the next monument, which we're going to write down because I'm definitely going to forget. The next monument. Trust me, that is what these words say. Yeah. Next one. So, the birds circled overhead, landing on the remains of what they tried to build. They tried to build a series of lovely houses, which they called
The laws.
they called the laws. You see, I'm not sure if you're aware, but Staffordshire for all of its time has been a lawless place. A place where injustice is a casual and natural part of everyday life. It's as normal to walk outdoors in the middle of Staffordshire and get punched by a cow as it is to be arrested for driving too fast. These things are the norm in Staffordshire, and the next monument was no place that was unused to these things. The birds landed upon this beautiful monument, the laws, these lovely houses. This is why I have to write things down. It's not going to help me in general, but it makes me feel like I'm doing a thing that will improve things. So, the birds. We should realise that birds aren't just flying things in the sky. They are, like you and I, people. Birds, like all people, have feelings. They also have names. Let's get some names for birds. The top goose, because that's how they arrange themselves in a hierarchy from top goose to bottom goose, which is exactly the same as how they roost, in a step. Bottom goose is crushed and compressed. This is often the largest goose. It thus follows that, unlike in many different kinds of tribes of humans and animals, the top goose is the smallest goose because it does the least harm. So the smallest top goose in this stack of birds that had roosted in the laws was named
H. Kruger.
H. Kruger. God, that's a good name. H. Kruger. His second cousin would later murder a bunch of children in the school before being immolated and returning as a dream murderer. Very exciting. Again, a different story and not this one. And that's very quite sure. Nightmare on Elm Street is not in Staffordshire. So, H. Kruger, top goose, sitting atop his stack of goose pals, looked around him. We have returned. We have returned to Staffordshire from our time in the south of France, drinking wine, eating butter exclusively. It has been a wonderful time. We sent many postcards back to our family. And look, here is our family to welcome us. They're not geese, but we regard all similar avians as being our brethren and part of our pals. And indeed, out of the ruins underneath the...
Another chunk of wood.
underneath the another chunk of wood, a fine monument that someone had intended to represent something, but they'd given up before finishing it. So we will never know what it was ready for. Sad. Out from under the chunk of wood came a bold and cocky pigeon. He was called...
The benevolent monarch.
The benevolent monarch. Ooh, that's gone wrong. Yep, there you go. That's getting worse. The benevolent monarch was, as you might imagine, the benevolent monarch of this lovely town, the next monument. He was actually recognised in the international court as the rightful ruler of the land. You see, as we know, any monarch, any king, queen, prince, princeling, possibly dukes, who knows, are infused with God's love, and God has set them on this earth to be in charge of a town, village, small country, any of these things. It is the divine right to rule that allows even a humble pigeon like benevolent monarch to rule with an iron fist. He was cocky for a reason. He had feet made of steel, terrifying claws that gouged out long, deep holes and crevices as he clawed his way across the concrete towards the stack of geese who had only so recently returned from overseas. "Greetings!" cried the benevolent monarch. "I see you have returned from overseas. Welcome. Now it is time for..."
The unfortunate Turkish war.
Now it is time for the unfortunate Turkish war. I know you are not ready. I know you have been on holiday. I know you weren't expecting this. You thought on your return, well, we'll have some sandwiches, we'll relax, we'll maybe dabble a bit in the pond. No algae for you. We must go immediately to war. Turkey is the most renowned foe that Staffordshire has ever had. Not just Staffordshire, even that hatred and pain is concentrated in the next monument, this small town full of incomplete statuary and buildings in which we inhabit. You and I, my goosey friends, we are going to fucking war. We're going to take on the Turks, we're going to take back what they took from us, which we'll explore later in the story if I remember, and we will overcome them. We will show that we are the birds that rule the roost, and that they don't get to go anywhere. Turkey, obviously, is occupied solely by turkeys in this version of reality. This was inevitable and natural that the birds one day fight amongst themselves. They were, of course, dinosaurs at heart. Dinosaurs want to murder things. A dinosaur is not just a lizardy type thing with feathers, but it is a way of life, a way of living, a way of thought. And even a pigeon, even a goose, they know that deep down they used to be gigantic sauropods that would stomp on smaller mammals. With no further ado, benevolent monarch swept a wing into the air, and as he did so,
the force of the hydraulic.
the force of the hydraulic lift rumbled all the way through the town, unfinished of the next monument. Unbeknownst to the rest of the world, in particular Staffordshire, the United Kingdom and the various military forces, the entire town's underground had been replaced and fortified over the centuries and now rose slowly out of the earth, like Metroplex in the Transformers movie from 1986, which, if you've seen that before, features a large robot that's also a city. Very exciting. The pigeons had seen this in the future and decided that is the way we're going to run this fucking town in Staffordshire. We are going to mechanise, revolutionise, electricize. And so, from underneath the ground, shaking apart monuments, arose gigantic cannons, huge.
Commissions.
Huge commissions! Wonderful! The artworks that had been thought of in the 15th century were finally coming to fruition. Out of the ground arose perfectly finished statues. A lovely statue of Queen Elizabeth I. How charming! A helter-skelter, rising from the ground that wouldn't have looked out of place in Blackpool. Down, around the slide, came a whole platoon of pigeons, flying, whizzing around, faster and faster as they flew. Into the sky, their steel hats glinting in the sunlight. This was Staffordshire at war. This was the pigeon's plan come to fruition. as a cloud of semi-metallic birds took flight around, wheeling in the sky, a little bit like that scene from a much better horror film, The Birds. Spun around the air, moving so fast that...
weakened by hyperventilating.
That's weakened by hyperventilating. They got very tired and began to drop one by one out of the sky. Alas, the benevolent monarch's army was failing even before they got a chance to fight the goddamn turkeys. Alas, it was going to just be the benevolent monarch and the geese as the pigeons landed one by one around them. They'd breathed too much and their sad little hollow bones shattered on impact. It was the saddest thing. The benevolent monarch watched his army destroy itself from the sky. He was crushed. He was like, this isn't what I expected. I thought they'd just, fly and they'd go and fight. It was very sad. H. Kruger took the benevolent monarch under his wing and took him to one side. He was looking a bit distressed, and he just whispered into his ear,
Geographical imitations.
Geographical imitations are no match for the real thing. You might have built a statue of Elizabeth I and a helter-skelter, but the real things are out there somewhere. That's what you need to win this war. Come with me, my friend. We will go and find Elizabeth I and a genuine helter-skelter. Together, they are the things that will destroy the Turkish peoples. Levermont was a little bit taken aback by this. All of his plans were thrown out the window. He'd been planning this for decades. His family had been planning for centuries. Look at the fucking mechanized world around him! And it was all for naught because his pigeon people were dead. One lonely badger walks across the town square and he looked at the ruins around him of pigeons, bits of buildings, bricks shaking everywhere. Lovely statue of Elizabeth I. Tough quality detail. Lovely bronze work, very lightly burnished, but not, as you normally see, somewhat tarnished by the weather, because you see it's been underground for several centuries, which is where it belonged. However, now that it was out of the ground, soon it would begin to decay, like all things. This is the nature of the way. So, our beloved friend H. Kruger, the goose. Well, we lost Frankie Knuckles, we haven't. We'll return to Frankie. Don't worry, he'll be super relevant later in the story. Super relevant. This is where I write shit down. I would never have told otherwise. It's a miracle I can even read that. Let's bring him into the story. So, H. Kruger, smallest goose friend, brought the money just across the town square, past this badge that was looking like they were all fucking nuts. I said, let's just sit down in this lovely cafe here. It's a cafe called
Stinky Stove.
Stinky Stove! Stinky Stove! Our favourite cafe. They do a lovely cup of tea and a some buttered toast. It's just the bee's knees. And the geese, having recently been in the south of France eating solely butter, were very excited to be able to continue their diet. It was very good. So they went into the Stinky Stove, and in there, the proprietor, one Frankie Knuckles. Yes! Fucking hell. So the guy said, "Alright, lads, you seen the spaceship? You seen the spaceship on the telly? Have you?" No, we're currently contemplating war with the Turks. We are distracted. We have many other things on our minds. Frank says, "No, come in, sit down. I'll make you a cup of tea, some lovely buttered toast. And why don't you watch the news while it's happening? You're so engaged in your warfare and your desire to murder turkeys that you're not looking at the bigger picture. Why not reflect on what your role is in the world? Remember, you might be dinosaurs, but dinosaurs have to change too and evolve with the times. Your weird underground metallic city has not been what you dreamt it was, has it?" Benevolent monarch was forced to admit, no, it had not. It had not met his expectations. His dreams had not quite succeeded where they hoped they would. Frankie Knuckles was unconcerned by this. "Yeah, right, you sit down there." He continued in an odd, semi-mocking way for a while. No one really knew where Frankie Knuckles had come from. Let us do a flashback. Frankie Knuckles' parents were born in Swindon, a charming town that was renowned for
The bourgeoisie.
the bourgeoisie. Frankie Knuckles endured 20 years of middle-class living in Swindon. He was treated with an education. He was allowed to have toys. He even had a yo-yo. His father drove a lovely brown Lada. It was a beautiful car. Are you familiar with Ladas? Lovely Russian cars. They look like shit, but goodness me, they warm up fast. which is very useful in Swindon, which, as you're probably aware, was in the grip of an ice age, from 1812 to 1983. It's only recently emerged from that, which is ahead of the story that we're telling, but we can flash forward a little bit to just examine the floods that spawned forth as Swindon melted off and everyone saw what an absolute shithole it was. Frankie enough to escape at the age of 20, however, from Swindon, realising that the middle class life was not for him. He wanted something more. He wanted to go where the real people were, where the normies were. Where are those working class fellows that I've heard so much about? He headed for Staffordshire, of course, the home of the potteries and not much else. When Frankie arrived, he found a small, totally abandoned town. And he realised he'd spent so much time in Swindon, surrounded by his middle-class pals and the bourgeoisie of his family, that he could just find himself, just in this weird town that populated only by birds and empty buildings. Maybe this was where he could, be himself. So he built himself a cafe, the Stinky Stove, a place where he could explore his nihilistic dreams and the strange things that happened to him when he slept, such as
signal mirror.
Such as signal mirrors. In his dreams, he saw himself as a survivalist, someone who could not just move from Swindon to Staffordshire, but could maybe survive in any environment on God's green earth. He'd probably be fine. He was, a strong child of the bourgeoisie, and even though he'd rejected many of their values and gone to work in a cafe, he was still pretty confident that he could take on the man, should the man turn up and want something from him. It's unclear what the man ever wanted, than to oppress him. But he'd lived his time in the Stinky Stove quite happily. His favourite thing was
Prussia.
So everything was Prussia, a now non-existent state that he admired very greatly. Prussia had made a lot of mistakes in its time, but it had some good stuff too, such as
the possessions of peasants.
the possessions of peasants. And Frankie realised that that's what his parents had been all about. Just taking other people's property and making it theirs. This is the nature of the bourgeoisie. Money rises to the top, it does not trickle down. This is a joke, which we have repeated oftentimes. One gathers money, one hoards it, one stacks it in a small space in your attic and surround it with bricks so that eventually it just looks like it's part of your house. And people believe that it's yours because it's in your house, so it must be yours, right? It must be your gold. But it isn't, it's
liberty and equality.
Liberty and equality shat on. That's what money is. It's a crushing world out there. We've been strongly affected by the socialist clown show we saw this afternoon. Nonetheless. So, God damn you, Lee. So Frankie had brought with him his hoarded parental wealth up to Staffordshire. And, with Prussia in mind, a great state that did lots of things, did a whole bunch of war, and then lost everything. He was prepared to invest everything that his parents had gained, all of his own ill-gotten gains from selling buttered toast to pigeons and other birds. He was prepared to do something with that. So, look, you, Mr. H. Kruger, you benevolent monarch, you look like you're in need of funds. I have funds. I have what you might think of as a nest egg. It's not a nest because I'm a human, but it's an egg. It's not an egg. Birds don't do metaphors. Before we go further, we should make that plain. So, the description of a nest egg instantly put the birds in mind of, this is where our children will come from. This will be the egg that I keep in my nest in case all the others die. The one egg that I can return to, crack open and find a baby inside. You're like, no, it's not, sorry, it's a confusing human metaphor for, it's the stuff that you keep. What does it mean as a metaphor? What is a nest egg? So we have a nest egg. We retain a number of things we refer to as our nest egg, so that in future, when our nest explodes, we still have things in it. Maybe the term nest egg doesn't mean anything. Maybe we've invested with too much deep meaning underneath its bare, simple words. These are all things that Frankie tried to explain to the birds. They didn't care. They wanted a war. Frankie thought he would spend some time later writing a small monograph about what the term nest egg might mean. He published it some 20 years later under the phrase nest egg. What's that? And it did surprisingly well. One of Watson's bestsellers for nearly 22 years. Very exciting. Anyway, that's Frankie's backstory. So he was prepared to gift all this money to another monarch and H. Kruger so they could prosecute their war against the Turks. A war that was plainly just, needed. Have we explained why he wanted to go to war with the Turks? No, I don't think that's come up yet. Maybe it will. Very exciting. So, with the money now available, Benevolent Monarch was able to invest this in more modern warfare strategies such as...
Copyright Stratemeyer Syndicate 1980.
What was the middle word?
Stratemeyer.
Stratemeyer. Such and so. Invest in such things as copyright Stratemeyer 1984. This was a robot who had been sent from the future. It's a difficult thing to order a robot from the future, but you can do it if you think carefully. You have to write a postcard and post it to a future 1984. I don't know if you've ever tried, but in the same way you can write Santa Claus, you can also write it to the future. It's exactly the same, just write it, 1984, please deliver. And also come back to 1973 and help me, please. This is what happened. In the future, 1984, a naked man appeared in a glowing ball on a street. He said, hello, it is me. I am... That was supposed to be Arnold Schwarzenegger. That's all good. No, Russian? Cool, he's Russian now. It is me, Arnold Schwarzenegger. I am a robot from, well now, because we're currently in 1984, but I am a robot that can be sent through time. I can only travel naked. It's weird. There's no real reason for that given in the story, because inside I'm made of metal. So, I don't know if you ever thought a great deal about the Terminator and the Terminator 2 and the entire franchise, but they actually make less sense as they go on. It's all good, but a very cool story. I, Arnold Schwarzenegger, I have received, what is this? A letter? Oh, how lovely. 1984, that's now. Arnold received post for the entire year. He finally found the one letter that was actually about him. All the others have been about Margaret Thatcher. It's very squirting. So he read from the story in his native Russian accent. Hello, future robot man. It's me. Would you please come back in time to help me mark the turkeys? That's a bold offer. What else do I have? He consulted his Filofax, because it was 1984. He recently bought a new set of pages to insert into the little clip thing. He was very excited. He loved all these things. He'd actually got a little insert that had a whole bunch of notes, along with just the regular calendar entries. You put names in, but Dad had a Filofax. It was a beautiful thing, Dad. I know you miss it. So Arnold flipped through his Filofax. There's no point going forward to the comic because I need to go backwards. So, was I doing anything important in 1973? Flickety, flickety, flip. I prosecuted a war against the Turks with some birds. I must go back in time. Otherwise, it wouldn't happen, and that would be a disaster. Time loops can't occur without someone doing part of the loop thing. So, he made his preparations for going back in time. It's complicated leaving your home and your family. His wife was named.
Popal.
His wife was named Popal. Also a robot, obviously by the name. But unlike Arnold, who was a robot, who was a humanoid bipedal robot, she was a microwave. Popal! Oh, my darling wife! I must go back in time once more to change the future. That's what I do. Popal resigned to her fate, and the fate of her husband sat on the kitchen counter and bing! She's a microwave. That's all she can do. That doesn't mean they couldn't love each other very much. And when a man or a robot loves a microwave, it's a very special thing. It warms you up. It's just beautiful. But don't put metal in it, otherwise it'll explode. So they never had sex. Which is very sad, but who wants little robot babies running around? No one does. We were about to have that anyway with the weird little Toby robots running around. All very bad. Anyway, so Arnold explained the situation to Popal. She hadn't yet exploded. Because that was it. I think it was going to happen in the future. When he returned from a successful mission, I thought, I will celebrate with you, my wife. Ba-bing! And, well, it's a very sad story. But you can imagine how that part goes. The funeral was great. So, the funeral for Popal. You might be surprised that there was a funeral for a microwave. But there was! This was a few years later, it's 1984, obviously. Microwaves were relatively new. I'd only recently discovered that if you put a pot of yogurt in with a little bit of foil still on the lid, it will go bang. Sorry, that's what happened in Kirby Lonsdale. Apologies. But at the funeral, there are a lot of people at the funeral because Pope Pal was pretty popular, as was Arnold. At the funeral, there's sort of service. It was presided over by the local vicar, a man called.
Joseph II.
God damn it, II. There had only ever been one Joseph previously, and he was Jesus' dad. This was the second one. And it's been 2,000 years since the second one. It's very exciting. He was a great big bear of a man. Like, he had a belly like
Ralph responded.
Like Ralph responded. He was a famous singer at the time. If you don't get the reference, no worries. That's in the past. he was a great big guy, and he kind of loved everybody. He was that kind of vicar who the community really trusted and would come out to see if he was singing in a band, doing some busking, even being in church. All of these things were options for him. And he stood there presiding over this sad box of cinders, which is what Pop Pal had become after she and Arnold consummated their relationship out of sheer excitement. And he gave a long and moving speech, only an excerpt of which we'll get into now. Pop Pal was a friend to the entire community. She was known for
many years of blood and terror.
She was known for many years of blood and terror, running a crime syndicate from the kitchen. Arnold Schwarzenegger, the Russian robot. But for all that, much like the mafia in New York, they were still about family. If you can go out and murder a bunch of people, but you still love your kids, don't you? And that makes it all alright. As you remember from The Godfather and many other tedious gangster movies. It's okay, as long as there's love in your heart, it doesn't really matter what terrible things you do. And Joseph II was big on that idea, and he continued. After her reign of blood and terror is now, alas, at an end. Our thoughts go with her family, with her robotic husband-man Arnold, with their stepchildren that they got from another marriage. Where did they come from? Stepchildren then, there were 3 stepchildren, they were called
The unbelievably powerful, deadly grip of the river.
They were called, collectively, the unbelievably powerful grip of the river. For, like their mother, they were a force of nature. If you think the Pop Pal, the microwave, presided over a reign of blood and terror, you got no idea what the fucking river got up to. My God, River of Blood was only the beginning. They from a very early age, they were into throwing milk bottles at things, and it only escalated from there. Their worst and most glaring escapade was when they
certain revenues and services.
was when they established that certain revenues and services were due to them, and only them. Taxation was a previously unknown thing in 1987 when we set Pope Pal's death, but they introduced it. It's their fault that they take a whole bunch of your money when you buy, crisps. Bad people. Anyway, back to the funeral. So, Pope Pal is gone. Our children live on, and through them, so does the murder and chaos that we've come to expect. It's a beautiful thing. We're now going to sing a hymn. That hymn is called, I don't do this to myself,
Moose Pond Shelter.
Moose Pond Shelter. Now I know you all know, and I'm only going to recite. I'm not going to sing it because I can't sing it. We erase their things. Once upon a time there was a moose, there was a river, there was a shelter. They lived together in harmony until they fell down a helter-skelter. It wasn't the last one of those rhyming hymns, which everyone regrets once they've begun. The moose and the grass and the shelter would find themselves in a place far from home, a place we might describe as
the meeting of deputies.
The meeting of deputies, where we meet the people who are deputised for God and the devil. Because they're very busy, they can't do things all the time. And so you'll remember the River Moose met with Deputy God, Deputy Devil, and they talked in great detail about what was good and what was bad in the world. And their conclusion was that the good things were...
I recognised his Cessna.
I recognise his Cessna, said Joseph II, suddenly distracted from his sermon and from his hymn. Out the window, there's a Cessna, look there, it's a car. Everyone looked around, Joseph fucked off out the back. The funeral was over, everyone was bewildered. Arnold was not happy about it, but he and his friends buried Pop Pal the microwave in a hole in the ground in the churchyard, and everyone was very sad. But this is all after we went back in time, which is the point of the goddamn story. We got distracted by Pop Pal again, the microwave. She's a very important character, which is not as important as Frankie Knuckles, H. Kruger, benevolent monarch, or indeed Arnold. Oh, that's closer. We can't change his accent now. He is still Russian, I promise. So, Arnold, having identified that he was in fact busy during 1973 and therefore did need to go back in time, and only in the future would he bury his wife, and not knowing that when he came back from the future, he'd bang his wife and then blow her up the thing out, he decided to travel back in time. He crouched in the way that all time travelers do, naked, in a little bubble, very similar to Bruce Forsyth when you think about it. Unconscious influence on James Cameron's movie making. How confusing. So Arnold knelt down, his bubble encased him, taking a chunk out of the linoleum floor that Popeye would give him a hell about when he returned. And he arrived in the middle of 1973, in the heart of the small town, the next monument. His arrival was preceded by
Frederick's death.
Frederick's death, but only just. You see, alas, Frederick was standing exactly where Arnold was arriving. So, as Arnold's naked, crouching form emerged from the wibbly-wobbly nature of time, Frederick exploded into a rain of blood that scattered down all around Arnold. Arnold, of course, had no idea any of this had happened. He just thought he'd arrived somewhere particularly grubby. But no, all around him was Frederick, a character who may or may not have previously featured in the story. Was he important? Maybe he was. Who knows? We'll never know if Frederick could have turned the tide of the war against the Turks. Because he was gone. He was dead. He was just little bits of bloody water. Very sad story. Well, I think dying this so far. Arnold rose to his cousin. Oh, I've come back from the future. You might be expecting me to be Austrian. I'm not. No, that's a Hollywood thing. It's like the real world. I'm very, very Russian. But I'm here to help you. You must be Frankie Knuckles. I got your letter. Thank you. It's a very good letter. I'm Arnold. Frankie, Benevolent Monarch, and H. Kruger were delighted. I realised that we began this as a horror story. Don't worry. That's also coming back. Probably. So, who am I here to kill? That's what I do. I'm a murderer, but I come to time, I kill things, I disappear back in time. Hey, it's kind of fun. Frank went, well, these birds here, there's Top Goose, H. Kruger, no relation, and also, well, second cousin, but so a relation, but not direct, not very direct. And by cousin, we mean like second or third cousin twice removed. It's complicated relation. Anyway, you don't need to know that. This is Top Goose, and this is Top Pigeon, Benevolent Monarch, and they need your help. Arnold turned to the birds. Hello. Hello, birds. You might be small and feathery, but I sense within you kinship. I sense within you the power of the dinosaur. I see your hearts. I see you beating in your chest. You look very nervous. Don't worry, it's okay. I'm just here to...
Mostly fools.
I'm just here to mostly falls! And he did. Executed a perfect pratfall right in front of them. What most people don't know about Arnold Schwarzenegger is that he had, being a time-traveling robot, he had a very long career end of the Pier shows. He started with Laurel and Hardy for like 3 seasons, very impressive. He was the guy who really taught them how to do the falls. It's pretty cool story really, but for a different time. Anyway, so he did actually one perfect pratfall. Landed smack on the concrete. I was like, oh! Are you okay? Said Benevolent Monarch, concerned that his new recruit who was supposed to help him win the war against the Turks might now be impossibly injured. No, it's fine, I'm a robot. You can't hurt me by falling over, but I hope you enjoyed the gag. They were nonplussed, as I think we all were by that occurrence. H. Kruger said, look, we're going to war, and we're just birds. Turkey's miles away, and although we believe it's full of turkeys, it's possible that might not be true. Arnold wasn't concerned. He said, you people...
Free, wealthy, and well-behaved.
Free, wealthy, well-behaved. His accent came back at the end of the sentence. Free, wealthy, and well-behaved. You are the perfect people for me to train up. Like in, you ever seen Red Dawn? Yeah? Okay, cool. Like in Red Dawn, where I trained myself and other people who were already soldiers to repel Russians. It was a confusing time, a confusing film, don't worry too much about it, but I'm going to train you to be the birds you are born to be. Thus follows a long montage of training scenes. Very exciting. So we see the birds lifting.
His pocket knife.
Lifting his pocket knife. Very big pocket knife. He only managed to travel back in time with it, because remember you can't carry other things, by shoving it up like in a prison. Because you don't travel without a pocket knife. Well, can't travel through time without a pocket knife. You need to be prepared. And he was, after a brief robo-shit, he was able to ride this pocket knife, very heavy pocket knife, and the birds trained it, lifting it above their heads using their wings, which don't actually bend that way. But they learned to bend that way, because inside those wings was a core of steel, a core of iron, war-loving lust that they were able to weaponize into doing really impressive reps with a penknife. Very good birds. Benevolent monarch, having gone through at least 20 minutes of a training montage, cried out.
Not entirely.
Not entirely, he's more of a strangled squawk. As he began to speak, and the weight of the pocket knife crushed him temporarily. Arnold, I think we're ready. I think it's time for us to go abroad and take this war where it needs to be. Arnold paused for a drink, because he was getting a little bit hoarse from talking. And he said, "Wonderful news! My job here is done." He crouched down like Brucey, vanished, never to be seen again by the poor pigeons and goose. Frankie was a little bit surprised as it took yet another scoop of linoleum, this time out of his cafe. He's like, "Oh man, I got a fucking fill up now." Oh, birds. Undaunted, H. Kruger and benevolent monarch, I still can't read that, it's a terrible H. I can't fix that. H. Kruger and benevolent monarch surveyed their army, which consisted of 12 geese. And that was it, because all the other birds had died, if you remember. Very sad. The badger, which had wandered briefly across the scene, it just kept going. He was looking no help. He didn't look back over his shoulder, in fairness. Fuck. And just off he went, back down into a set, and he gave rabies to his family. Beautiful story. That's the horror part. Scary. They hadn't been paying attention to the television, which was on behind them in the cafe, the Stinky Soap, the whole time. On that, there was a remarkable thing going on. We'd been to the moon before in a year, and other rockets had gone up since in subsequent years. But this year was the year of Apollo 17, which sounds a bit like a chicken when you think about it. Apollo 17! And no one knew that rocket was in fact stuffed with birds. Terrifying. On the launch pad in Houston, where such things occur, the astronauts have been ready to go. So there was a pair of astronauts supposed to go up on Apollo 17. Let's give them names to make life more difficult. The first was called
Margrave Charles Frederick of Baden.
Margrave Charles Frederick of Baden, a lovely town where Baden Powell came from. So very, you know a lot about the Scouts, which is nice but not relevant. Not relevant for this story. So Margrave, and also
Illustrated by Leslie Morrill.
Illustrated by Leslie Morrill, which is an unusual name. So usually illustrated by just cramped down to illustrated by. Leslie was her middle name, of course, and Morrell the surname. But illustrated by became kind of a moniker that other people would recognise and would know what they meant by. Illustrated by and Margrave were due to get on board the Apollo 17 rocket and go and chill in space for a while. Space is big, very big, as you remember from other better books. It's a lovely place to explore and investigate. There's not much out there. It's very quiet and very peaceful. They were both coming out of really awful divorces, and so we're quite keen on having some quality time together to forget about their lives. It was going to be pretty cool. So yeah, they were ready. They were suited up. They were boots up. They were all going, yeah, let's go to space, man. Very American accents, obviously. And they were ready to climb into their space house. It's called rocket. Good. Space house. That's a word thing that didn't work. They were ready to climb into their space house when from behind them came a noise like.
Mothers suckling their children.
Like mothers suckling their children. Awful suckling sound of like loose lips, flapping gums, liquid dripping as if from the ceiling in some awful dank cellar, like Rock City on a Saturday night back when you could still smoke in there. Oh, it's horrible. This is black liquid. This is the horror scene. Dripping from the ceiling. Awful sound. They stopped. Margrave, and the other one illustrated by stop it, I should have written those down, but I don't know what you did. Margrave, illustrated by... Yep, Margrave, illustrated by, stop. What's that now? What's that noise said illustrated by, but in an American accent? Margrave responded in another American accent. I don't know, but it sounds like mothers suckling their babies. But that can't be right. We're in the middle of nowhere. This is Houston. It's all desert and, fire and shit. That's what we do here. We're just getting ready to go to space. Well, let's just double back. Just have a look inside that dark doorway behind us that we came out of. So they did. They went back there in their American accents and looked through the doorway and were set upon by chickens! Terrifying chickens! Hundreds of them! They just tumbled out of the darkness. Feathers, wings, flying, fur, a beak, an eye, a bit of comb. God knows what they've been doing in there. Like some kind of ravenous sex pest having a great time in a room. Sounds cool, but not so cool for Margrave and illustrated by, no, they were torn. Skin from skin, their nails pulled out by the vicious beaks of, what are those cool little birds, those cool chickens, they fancy things?
Silkies.
Silkies! Oh, the worst of all chickens. So you may not be aware there's a hierarchy of chickens. I just think it's important to end stories like this that we cut back edges and make sure we understand what the stakes are. Because I think it makes a difference to the story. So, there are loads of different kinds of chickens. I know they all look alike, but they're not. They're different. They're all people. As we went into before, they're all dinosaurs. They've all got their own things, their own desires. At the bottom, you've got ordinary chickens. At the top, you've got silkies. That's it. I just thought it was important to recap that before we went on. Silkies are the bad bitches, right? They come armed with...
Oh, great. Hubcap dry.
They come armed with hubcaps and
Dry.
Oh, dry and dry ice to make a more dramatic entrance. Usually, in Silkies, you can hear this clang, 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 and the room fills up with mist. It's like a cool discotheque, and yet it's not just full of murder birds. Silkies that leap forwards, claws extended, and as happened to Margrave and illustrated by in their sad American accents, they were ripped, flesh from flesh, sinews splashed across the ceiling, if that's a thing that sinew can do. Maybe it is. It happened this time. You couldn't tell them because it was a very dark room. No one would ever return to that room. There was just a blood-spattered doorway. Out of it came two ungainly, twitchy, and weirdly moving astronauts. Yes, you guessed it. The spacesuits of Margrave and illustrated by were full of chickens, and those chickens were going to space. Core to the story, it's very integral, I promise. They stumbled somehow, knees shaking, elbows twitching and flailing backwards in all sorts of ways. So we have different body parts to birds, so they find it quite hard to replicate. But they got into space, they did all right. And all this unfolded on television inside the stinky stove, behind Frankie Knuckles, H. Kruger, and Vanilla Water, as they discussed their plans for taking down Turkey. All the drama that they thought they were facing was as nothing compared to chickens in space. My God! On the TV behind them, the commentators were a bit confused. They were treating it... Commentators? Newscast is probably the word I want, but I said commentators. And thus, and there they are, going up in space. Oh, that's right, they flew the atmosphere. Oh my goodness, look at that. Oh, disengaging booster rockets. My goodness, so exciting, look at them go. Oh, they're looking around. Oh, look around, what can you see, Bob? Well, I can just see looking out the window, Bob. Great! Both commentators are called Bob. And so, they were the people that saw the chickens inside the spacesuit helmet. They expected to see like a smiling American face illustrated by our Margrave as they reached zero gravity in orbit. But no, it wasn't. It was just a maddened Silky going mental inside a glass ball. I think at that point we realised that the Earth was probably lost. It was the first intimation of the true doom that would embrace and encompass the entire human race and in the galaxy in later years. But that, again, is another story for a different time. This is still 1973. Those chickens, which were to drift in space for eons until they were discovered by a far future civilization and would retro-build them to try and figure out what planet they could have come from, and instead constructed a planet of the chickens, where the chickens that had gone into space, those 42 Silkies crammed into spacesuits, became gods of a whole cosmos, and eventually set out to conquer and to spoil the rest of the galaxy. pretty cool. But we returned to the stinky stove, where shit was getting real. They were ready for war. The 10 geese had been beautifully trained by the Russian cyborg man robot, Arnold Schwarzenegger, and they were ready to take on anything. The other one realised that we're a bit short-handed, Frankie. Would you care to assist? I go, no, I've got nothing else to do. I hate the bourgeoisie. And the bourgeoisie in Turkey? They both nodded, very vigorous. Definitely bourgeoisie in Turkey. I'm in. All right, let me get my fighting things. I've got a trunk full of
insurance.
I've got a trunk full of insurance and I'm pretty sure we're going to need that if we're going to war. You want to be covered in case there are any claims against the damage that you do and the damage done unto you. I don't want to see anything bad happen, but if you do get a boo-boo or get a knock knee, I want you to have the appropriate medical care available through the policies. Let me take you through those policies now. Frankie pulled out a series of clipboards that were just tucked behind the counter and got all the geese signed up pretty quickly for some quite comprehensive life insurance schemes. Very impressive. The cover was very good. They, of course, birds can't read, which was a shame, because if they had, they would have seen that there were a whole bunch of very small clauses written in, well, big clauses, written in small letters that said things like, I don't have to pay out if you're a bird. Which is unfortunate. Frankie had robbed the birds without me even knowing. He stood to make a fortune. Whether those birds came back from Turkey or not, he was going to be minted for life. He would add it to his weird nest egg of other stolen things that he'd taken from the poor working classes around the UK. You see, Frankie, like all of us, was a man torn between his impulses. You know, he hated his middle class upbringing. He wanted to just be an ordinary worker in Staffordshire, but he'd moved to Staffordshire years ago, come to this little town, the next monument, and there's nothing there. Maybe the socialist dream was a lie. Maybe he should embrace capitalism. Maybe, I broke my pen. He said, surprise, as the pen flipped off the clipboard. But it was all right. But Monica had already signed. It was going to be fine. He was going to make a fortune out of this. So together they went to war. Now Turkey's a long way. It's quite hard to get there. Geese fly regularly. Pigeons, not so much. Frankie packed them all into a suitcase. It was quite hard work. It's quite hard getting geese into a suitcase, even when they know it's in their interest. But who wants to get in a suitcase? Not geese. These are armed military geese. They know their shit. But they got in there, and he managed to cram him a little bit Mike as well. And off he went to East Midlands Airport, where there are regular flights to Turkey. So he got one, and he was sitting next to a lovely chap called
Louis the 15th.
Louis the 15th, less cool than the Sun King, his son, but still pretty badass. He wasn't yet murdered by the French peasantry, so that was good. So they set together on a flight, and yeah, they watched a great new film that was very new and a bit early. They watched The Terminator, which had travelled back in time to be on the television screen, which weren't in airplanes in 1973. Pretty good flight. Anyway, they got to Turkey, and you know we are running out of time. They got to Turkey, and they obviously got off. He picked up his suitcase of battered birds from the carousel where those comes out, and he said,
you too can learn how to deal with disaster.
he said, you too can learn how to deal with disaster! Hey, we made it! Welcome to Turkey, lads! Without even leaving the concourse, he slammed the suitcase on the floor, and birds erupted from the suitcase. It was like
absolute power.
It's like absolute power! Power had come to Frankie Knuckles. He had the power to unleash havoc and chaos in the concourse of Turkey's main airport, named
STOP.
Named STOP, which stood for sometimes other people. Because that's what happens at airports. Sometimes other people have just emerged from planes. You didn't know they were coming, but they're just there, suddenly, in your country. What the hell is this? But no one in Turkey was ready for an influx of mad armed geese. They spread out, fanned out, wings, stretching out, filling up as much space as possible in the concourse. Benevolent Monarch cried out loud in his biggest, baddest voice.
In Portugal, it is assumed a special character
In Portugal, this is assumed a special character.
Yeah.
In Portugal, this is assumed a special character, but I'm from Staffordshire, and this is me. I'm real, not just a character. I'm not pretending. We're really here to fuck you all up and kill you. At last, I'm going to prosecute my war upon you people. I had a reason for it, and that reason will now become clear. It's because...
Frank mouthed slowly.
Behind London Monarch, Frankie was mouthing very slowly along the words that he was saying. It's good, because if someone's doing that while you're talking and look at you, it's really hard to go, oh, yeah, oh, thankfully that distraction was behind me. So, Bernard was able to elucidate his reasoning and why he loathed the Turks so much. It was because...
I shall not speak of England.
Because I shall not speak of England! In my long speech to you people in this Turkish concourse, I speak instead of... Pardon? I speak instead of...
Jungle.
Jungle! Jungle is massive! And yet, in your Turkish way of life, you have spun jungle and drum and bass. The true musical heart, which every dinosaur rumbles with. Every roar of a dinosaur or a tiny bird is inflected with breakbeats, bass snare, and wonderful, evocative, screaming men doing kind of reggae beats on things and some weird sampling. That's why I've come, because you rejected the music of my people, the music of my heart, so I have come to lay waste your land. The Turkish people were obviously scared as fuck. This is very surprising when a whole bunch of geese turn up in your concourse and start mouthing off. Did I mention they also had guns? The geese had a lot of guns, and they just opened fire, spraying the concourse liberally with lead or whatever is actually in bullets these days. It's mostly cordite, maybe some of those. Oh, they could have those tracer rounds. Yeah, okay, imagine it cinematically. So, the bullets they got are these cool like uranium tracer rounds. They glow, but also like irradiate everything that they hit. So, in the middle of the Turkish concourse, it's like 10 o'clock in the morning or something. 10 geese just gone mental, just off the luggage carousel. All armed with massive machine guns that they couldn't possibly carry. But nonetheless they are, they're squeezing the triggers. Somewhere in the future I'll going, I did a good thing. But we'll see. As the geese opened fire and Benevolent Monarch saw that his plan was about to succeed, something very frightening happened that makes this a horror story. It was...
The names of Kant and Humboldt.
The names of Kant and Humboldt. Yes, the squids. We're familiar with the Humboldt squid? Very big, very scary, lives very deep down. Well, no one was expecting it to erupt out of the floor of the Turkish concourse. Just at that moment, seizing both Benevolent Monarch, H. Kruger, and his entire team of geese. It wrapped them in his massive tentacles, the little suckling shaking, making an awful noise like the suckling of babies at a mother's breast. It was a nightmare. It was like the chickens were back again, but it wasn't. It was a squid. Isn't it weird how animals all make the same noise? But it's true. Same way they all taste like chicken, they all sound the same. The squid grabbed them, dragged him towards its beaky maw. As he was going, the one went, he's got a beak. I wonder if he's also a... but no, he was crushed. And the Humboldt squid disappeared into the ground, leaving Immanuel Kant standing next to him. Well, I did not expect that to happen. No. That should have been what Arnold sounded like. This is a great big surprise. Was a philosophical ideal being expanded? Frankie, of course, had survived. Yes, there was a big fight over whether the jungle was good music or not. And I said, I don't know what that is. I died 200 years ago. You never heard jungle? You come back to sing your song with me, mate. I'll show you a banging good time. So Emmanuel and Frankie Knuckles boarded the next flight back to Staffordshire. They arrived in Staffordshire, and from Eastman's Airport, obviously. It's a small trip, we're over time. Small trip, but they hopped on a small minibus that goes the whole way from Eastman's Parkway to the town of the next monument. And there they got to appreciate, for maybe the first time now that the warmongering fucking birds had left, that actually the last monument had something going for it. Sure, there were weird mechanised portions of the city that had erupted out of the ground. Sure, there's a big statue of Elizabeth I, who we said we were going to go and find for real, and we never did. There's a hell skelter, we never even went looking for that. And yet, they were like, yeah, this is the place. Behind them on the TV, the chickens had turned the spaceship into an awful den of chicken shit and was about to head off into deep space. looked at each other and said, well, cup of tea? Emmanuel said, yes, that would be very nice. And that is the end of the story.